October 25th, 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary opened its doors as part of the reformatory Pennsylvania system, a vision to create a humane prison where labor, complete solitude, and discipline together would make inmates penitent, hence the term penitentiary. Fortunately, the prison went overboard in its definition of solitude. Initially designed to hold 250 prisoners, with Gothic architecture intentionally built to be intimidating to outsiders, the prison would use extreme measures to guarantee absolute solitary confinement. All prisoners stayed in their own cells and were not to interact with any other inmates. They also had extremely limited contact with prison guards and other personnel. Private outdoor areas were designed so inmates could exercise without interacting. They were allowed outside for 1 hour each day, and when they did leave their cells, hoods were put over their heads to prevent communication and knowledge of the layout of the prison. Their cells became their world. They worked in there, they ate in there, and they were not allowed to have any contact with the outside world, either in the form of letters, visits from family, or newspapers. Violence was enforced by prison guards, who for years faced allegations of abusing the prisoners, despite the system being created for the prisoners and guards to rarely interact. Some of the more grueling punishments included dunking inmates in a bath during winter, after which they were hung up on a wall so that ice formed on their skin. There, prisoners would be bound so tightly that their circulation was cut off, which sometimes left them permanently injured, and some say led to amputation in some cases. An iron gag was also used, which was secured to an inmate's mouth, ripping the tongue and mouth, while hands were tied behind the back, and there's even one recorded instance in which an inmate died as a result of this iron gag. 6. Solitary confinement at the prison would start to be phased out, and the Pennsylvania system was officially abandoned in 1913. But ironically, a prison that was once too solitary would become too crowded, opening the door to a whole new set of horrors. By 1926, there were over 1,700 inmates at Eastern State. This resulted in 2 or even 3 inmates sharing cells, some of which were originally intended to only hold 1 person. In 1933, inmates rioted against overcrowding by setting fire to cells. It's possible this could offer an explanation for the activity in cell block 12. Voices and a cackling, high-pitched laugh have been heard. Tour guides have reported that the cell doors on the 3rd floor of cell block 12 seemingly open by themselves when nobody's looking. In an episode of Ghost Hunters, the crew believed they spotted a figure running on the catwalk in cell block 12. Entries recorded in the prison's death ledger, a book that documents which inmates died and by what cause in the years that Eastern State was operating. A good portion of these deaths were from sickness, such as tuberculosis. Other deaths were due to suicide, or even murder. One of those murders occurred in cell block 8 in cell 49, where an inmate named Joseph Havel stabbed his cellmate George Kopp to death with a pair of scissors. Maximum security block, where there's reports of whispers and also a shadowy figure running. Notable of Eastern State Penitentiary's inmates was notorious Chicago mob boss L. Scarface Capone. Capone spent about 8 months in this penitentiary between 1929 and 1930 for carrying a concealed deadly weapon. Unlike most inmates, Capone's cell was actually rather nice, containing paintings, a polished desk, a radio playing waltz music, and a softly glowing desk lamp. However, things weren't as comfy as they seemed for Capone. One of the crimes Capone was believed to mastermind was the Valentine's Day Massacre, which resulted in the death of 7 men, one of whom was a man known as Jimmy Clark. Capone's contemporaries inside Eastern State reported hearing Capone screaming and begging for someone named Jimmy to get out and leave him alone. Capone's cell has been restored to the state it was when he lived in it and can still be visited today. Escape attempts. One unsuccessful attempt involved 12 men who took turns using spoons and flattened cans to dig a 31-inch hole in a wall of cell 68, eventually burrowing 12 feet underground. As these inmates were recaptured, they were moved to cell block 13, the punishment block, often referred to as the hole. The hole now consists of 4 solitary cells measuring just 4 by 8 feet. Inmates would be locked in these dark, dank, and poorly ventilated cells for up to